Okay, thanks. As always, we record these meetings and put them on our website and for anyone who's registered and send them to anyone who's registered and couldn't join us. So welcome everyone. I'm Minerva Delgado with the Alliance to End Hunger, joined by my colleague. Aaliyah, you want to introduce
Hey
yourself?
everybody, I'm Aaliyah, Hungry Communities Associate. Good to see you all. I'll pass it to Karen if you want to introduce yourself.
Hey everyone, I'm new. As of the middle of September, I'm the U.S. Policy Manager for the Alliance to End Hunger. And thank you for everything you're doing out in the States. Most of my time in my career has been spent working in a state of North Dakota. So I really appreciate all that you are doing in your states.
And Aaliyah, do you want to just guide people through introductions? Ozma, why don't you go next?
Hi, I'm Asma Ahad from the Islamic Food and Nutrition Council of America, and I work with the Alliance to End Hunger. We're a member. We're so excited to be here and to share some information about our community today.
And then next I see Jillian on my screen. Go ahead.
Hey everyone, I'm Jillian. I'm from Monco Anti-Hunger Network in Pennsylvania. We work with 71 food pantries and free meal providers, and I'm the innovation coordinator here.
And Luke, see you next.
Everyone, my name is Luke Elzinga. I work at an interfaith organization in Des Moines, and our primary work is a food pantry network. Also serve on the board of the Iowa Hunger Coalition and do some work with the Iowa Food System Coalition as well. And probably some other groups too. But just thank you for recording these two. I know I haven't been able to make the past few ones, so appreciate that.
All right, I'm glad you've been able to access the recordings. And Sarah, I see you on my screen next.
Yeah, hey, I'm Sarah Gonzalez. I'm with the Hunger Solutions Institute at Auburn University. We run the End Child Hunger in Alabama network, as well as several other programs that work in Alabama and the region and then across the country. And so I'm excited to be here. Thanks.
Thank you. Mark?
Hi, Mark Willis. I'm with the Hall Hunger Initiative, and we are in a farm near Dayton, Ohio, and we work on root causes of hunger, including poverty and systematic racism.
And Colleen?
Hey, good morning. I'm Colleen. I use she, her pronouns. I work with United Way at King County in Seattle, Washington. We operate a food delivery program partnering with local food banks and delivering to folks who can't access it in person. I'm so excited to be here. Thank you.
Thank you for coming. And Victoria?
Hi, I'm also at United Way working with Colleen for the home delivery program.
Thank you for being here. And Bita? Did I say your name right?
It's Bita, but thank you.
Bita.
Hi, I'm Bita. I'm with the Montgomery County Food Council in Montgomery County, Maryland. And we basically serve as a connection point for food assistance providers to be able to communicate with the county and receive grants. So
Thank you so much for joining us.
Wonderful. Thank you all for joining us today. We're going to get right into our first presentation. So we have Asma, who's going to talk about hunger in among Muslim populations, as well as the work that they do at Ifanka in terms of providing greater access to halal foods for food insecure people. So Asma, we'll turn it over to you. And I know you have a presentation, and so we're sharing the screen now.
Thank you. Thank you so much for having me. After hearing everybody's introduction, I think I'm glad I was going to take a lot of the content out of this presentation, but I think that there's stuff in here for everybody. So we're going to talk about food insecurity among the Muslim population in the United States. So going to the next slide. I work at the Islamic Food and Nutrition Council of America, and so I'm going to start by giving you guys a little bit of information about my organization, then talk to you about what is halal and why it's important to our community and why that drives access to halal food drives food insecurity among Muslims in America. And And then we're going to talk about some of the programs that we have in place that kind of sets us up to be able to address some of the needs, but also our limitations as an organization of what we can do. We're, you know, a service-based organization, and we're not really we don't really connect directly with the consumers. So we'll talk a little bit more about that and how all of you have an important role in this conversation in terms of either directly having an impact on the work that we do or connecting us with the right people. So we can go to the next slide now. So about Ifanka, Ifanka is a globally recognized organization and a leader in all matters halal to food, nutrition, and pharmaceutical products. We were founded in 1982 as a not-for-profit organization, and we were just there to educate industry, educational institutions, consumers about what's halal and what's not, and really build an understanding, bridge an understanding between halal consumers in the United States and the different entities. And with the globalization of the food industry in the mid-1980s, we fell into the service of certification. So now, today, we're a financially independent, not-for-profit organization that provides certification for like all sorts of companies, big and small. Like we certify Conagra, or I'm sorry, and Cargill, Firmenich, Danisco, Pfizer, but we also do a lot of small companies that are looking to get started and to move into this space. Our focus is to help halal observant Muslims meet their needs with respective considerations for food security, health security, and nutrition equity. This is probably the part of the presentation where I could talk about this a little, and I don't want to, we can discuss it more later if it's relevant, but just to understand, we support a lot of institutions and organizations that enable food security in the U.S. and abroad. For example, we gave an endowment to Texas A&M University and to start the first food diversity program in the United States. And what that food diversity program does is it's a degree program that educates the next generation of people that are coming through the educational system to understand, you know, what does it mean to be halal observant, but not just halal observant. What does it mean to be that if you need gluten-free food or allergen-free food or kosher food, and how that impacts a person's food security and the ability to access nutrition and be food secure. So that's some of the work that we do, but we do a lot of other work in that same nature across the country. But I'm just laying out Texas A&M because it's the easiest to explain and people could probably understand the relevance in the different spaces that we're in. So we love to partner. We love to partner with Alliance to End Hunger and other organizations as well to address these needs, not just for, we focus on halal consumers, but we do support a lot of initiatives that have a universal impact. We can go to the next slide. So the terms that we're going to talk about here today is halal, and that's probably the most important term. Halal means permitted or allowed according to Islamic law, and it's mostly referred to when you're talking about food. And we're going to talk about the observance of halal among the Muslim community based on data that we have shortly. But often access to halal food will dictate whether communities are food secure or not secure. And it's almost independent of like socioeconomic or racial divides. And then the other term that's often used is haram, which means prohibited or forbidden according to Islamic law. And it's most often used when you're talking about food again. And, you know, the key things that are forbidden under Islamic law are pork and alcohol and anything that's cross-contaminated. We can move to the next slide. And then, so why is halal important? So there's a couple of studies we've cited here. There is a Pew Research study as well as a Institute of Social Policy and Understanding study that we cited here to kind of demonstrate why halal is important. So what we found in these two studies, in a combination of these two studies, is a majority of Muslims adhere to halal guidelines and would risk their food security to protect their religious values. the Muslim population in the US is younger than the general population. Therefore, K through 12 observant students are disproportionately impacted in educational settings than their cohorts. So it's not only impactful, like this is a presentation I put together for a public school system, but it's also impacted like in programs like SNAP and WIC and in other spaces. And then there's a Sullivan High School survey that I'm going to cite in a moment that we could demonstrate how this truly impacts people on a day-to-day basis. Next slide. So according to the national study, ISPU study, the vast majority of Muslims, 83% of all walks of life, require or prefer eating halal. Halal and kosher dietary guidelines share some similarities. A lot of times people say, well, we have kosher. Why don't you just take kosher? So they have some similarities, but are different in significant ways, and observing one does not meet the requirements for the other. And halal dietary needs must be considered in all contexts where people are given food. So when we talk about food insecurity among Muslims in the US, I feel like this bar graph really kind of summarizes the acute need or the acute nature of food insecurity among Muslims in the US. Their food insecurity among Muslims is probably the highest among several cohorts, on par with Hispanics and really close to the African American population. So food insecurity food insecurity is not just related to socioeconomics. Like one of the things we found is that when kids go to college and their food if the college campuses don't serve halal food, those kids are not eating. And we actually did like a qualitative analysis, and we found that these kids were not able to focus on school. They were losing hair. They were not able to participate in college activities or campus activities because they didn't have food where they were in the campus setting. So these are just based on nuggets of data that we've obtained. And one of the points I want to make here is like a lot of times when we see policy or people making decisions about how to address food insecurity, you have to have data on the population. You have to have had somebody do a study and say this is a need, and then decide to create a program and fund that need. And one of the things that we found is that the data for the Muslim population is very limited, although they do have specific dietary needs, and they are one of the cohorts that are the highest food insecure in the country. And so the lack of data creates a lack of story to tell. And then there's not programs. There are not programs that are built out to address these needs. So what we're doing is we're trying to pull information from spaces that we can get concentrated information, like in college settings. We know that there's studies done in that space. There's a study done by the American Academy of Nutrition and Dietetics that showed that acute food insecurity is double the amount of the national average. I think the national average of acute food insecurity among college students is 14%, and among Muslim kids about 32 or 34%. So, and what we found is that from our work that there's no majority ethnicity for Muslims in the US. And regardless of, like I said, this is redundant now, but regardless of ethnic or socioeconomic status, Muslims adhere to halal values. So it impacts anybody that requires food in a setting, like in public schools or colleges, so on and so forth, that the halal needs need to be addressed. So we did, like I said earlier, there's not a lot of data out there on this population. So Illinois did a study, and it was called the Illinois Muslims Report, and we're using this case study here that 4 out of 5 Muslims in the U.S. in Illinois responded that halal is important to them, and 94% said it had an impact on their purchase decisions. So to drive like the impact of access to halal home further, I want to take the Sullivan High School survey that was done back in 2021. Sullivan High School is a Chicago public school, and it's nicknamed Refugee High because there's so many refugees in there at that school. It's a low-income immigrant, a large refugee population high school, and about 15% of the kids at the school are Muslim. And in a 2021 survey, they found that 80% of the Muslim students that said that they were hungry always or often because there was no suitable halal options at school. And because of that, nearly two-thirds said they had to bring home from food for going the free lunch and breakfast program provided under the federal programs. And they said a lot of them said it was because of lack of halal options. Can we click on the sound bar? The sound thing. There's a short clip here that I think that I'd love
Good
to.
morning. We hear a lot and talk
Can everybody hear that?
a lot about food insecurity, which is defined by the USDA as a lack of consistent access to enough food for an active, healthy life. Doesn't that seem inconceivable in this land of plenty? Well, according to Feeding America, there are nearly 500,000 people in Cook County who are food insecure. And it isn't always just about access to food, it's sometimes about access to the right kind of food, as we find out at Sullivan High School in Rogers Park.
We are a school where we speak over 40 different languages.
That is Joshua Cepeda, refugee social worker for Chicago Public Schools.
And we have a huge population of Muslim students and almost no halal options.
And for Muslims, all food must be halal, meaning sourced and prepared under Islamic rules. And the food offerings at CPS are not in tune with halal, leaving a lot of students food insecure during school hours.
83% of our students felt hungry and felt that there were no suitable halal options.
And how does that play out on a day-to-day basis?
Kids are going hungry. They're waiting till they can get home to eat. They're missing out on after-school activities. They're not able to access tutoring after school because they're hungry and they want to go home and eat. How do you play soccer on an empty stomach? And we have so many students that want to do these things, but maybe don't have the opportunity to do them because they're hungry throughout the day, because they don't have suitable halal options.
So students at Sullivan High School are taking their case to Aramark, the provider of lunches at Sullivan,
and demanding that they provide them with suitable options.
Josh Cepeda's comments came last week at a community meeting during UNICEF's Global Forum for Children and Youth. It was sponsored by the Islamic Food and Nutrition Council of America, which is headquartered in Des Plaines.
I just wanted to play that clip so you guys kind of understand how it's playing out on a day-to-day basis for kids who are going to school, but this is playing out at home or at food banks. When we have a lot of refugees, a lot of refugee communities in like Colorado or like Maine, and those conversations are playing out even at home for folks who don't have access to halal food.
Good morning. We hear a lot and
So
talk
let's
a
go
lot
to the
about
next slide. So the impact of food insecurity is long lasting. We actually published a paper in the Journal of Nutrition, Education and Behavior last year or this past summer, and it was titled Establishing Healthy Dietary Patterns for Muslim Students K through 12 and college students. And it's kind of just highlighted the impact of lack of access to halal food that it has on the development and performance short-term and long-term for kids. Next slide. And then this is this was a student, Muhammad Ridwan, who is a Rohingya refugee from Malaysia. And, he just talked about how, he said, I was always hungry in school and tired, and I don't want to do things. And it was the same thing with other students. His classmates and him would hurry home after school, and that meant missing after school activities. And the biggest thing that impacted me is I heard it from him and other students saying that their relationship with the teachers became strained because they would act out in class because they were hungry. And it took a while for the teachers to connect that with the fact that the kids were just hungry because they were not offered suitable food options. And what's important, the biggest learning that I find that food service providers had from this study, or food providers had from the study, is that even if these kids were you know, from socioeconomically disadvantaged homes, or even if they were being provided free food at school and they didn't have adequate nutrition at home, they still didn't want the food that was being offered to them because it didn't meet their dietary guidelines. Next slide. So that's kind of in summary the need that we've been able to showcase based on the data that we've been able to pull together. But one of the things, being in a lot of different conversations with, you know, like, for example, talking to folks from Feeding America or different food banks, one of the things we've learned is that halal is not only a need on campuses and schools, but it's also an emerging need, probably a top 3 need or a number 1 need across several food banks, depending on the geography in the US. And I'm going to talk a little bit more about the work that we're doing with one of the food banks and how we have another food bank in line to build out the programs. And I'll talk a little bit about the work we're doing with campus dining, a little bit of work that we're doing with public schools, and then just touch a little bit on airline kitchens. We do airline kitchen work because airlines have come to us and said, when people fly, we need to provide halal meals. And the reason I'm providing that information is to show that we have expertise in these different spaces, so that if there's a need, we know how to we know how to address the supply chain and fill that void. But we still do need to build out infrastructure. And we did lay that out so in the article for the journal that we wrote for the Journal of Nutrition Education Behavior, we laid out where the gaps were in building out infrastructure within the US and having data to support how the supply chain will work is an important part of us being able to meet the needs of this community. So we can go to the next slide. So basically, we have a large food service program that we're building out, and it's really the US are like, when we do our work globally, we do a lot of it for export, right? We do a lot of our work to enable trade for the US. But the work that we're doing here is really to address food insecurity and ensuring that people in the US have access to food. Some of the work that some of the bullet points that we have is we're collaborating with Chicago Public Schools to help them build out their infrastructure. There's a bill on the docket at the state that is looking to be passed probably the beginning of next year to say that, religious dietary needs need to be addressed, and that should be law. And how are they going to do it? So we're working with Chicago Public Schools preemptively to figure out how that would work for them and how we would build out that system and make sure that the needs are being met while the infrastructure is being able to support it. We work with the Chicago Council on Global Affairs to kind of get the Congress and the Senate and TFAB, like that area. How do we get their attention on these issues? And so that's something we're working with the Chicago Council of Global Affairs. We also work with the Alliance to End Hunger on that as well. We are working with the USDA to discuss how do we look at establishing guidelines nationally, and they're very receptive to our input. The challenge for everybody becomes the separation of church and state, and how do we enforce halal guidelines while keeping church and state separate. We support the Academy of Nutrition and Dietetics to help assess the need from a nutrition perspective and providing input for national impact. And then we work with the Muslim Student Association. They have college chapters and high school chapters to really elevate their voices. And then I talked a little bit about our Texas A&M Endowment for Food Diversity. So we can go to the next slide. So probably the space that's most relevant for the team here is the food bank program. We have an MOU with the Central Pennsylvania Food Bank to develop a supply chain that meets the needs of halal consumers that has integrity. So what we're doing is we're working with them to start from the suppliers to the point of the product reaches their partners, and it has integrity and there's no cross-contamination, and so the clients could feel comfortable about taking the product and knowing it's halal. So we are doing this in partnership with the USDA Center for Faith-Based Partnerships, and we're going to be starting the pilot program in January. And that's kind of where there's more details here you guys could review if you guys would want, or ask me more questions about this. I'd love to talk about this if we're interested in the Q&A. The next slide, we do campus dining. I talked a little bit about it. It really came from acute need on college campuses where these kids are, not trusting the campus cafeterias. And right now we work really closely with 4 universities: University of Chicago, Wayne State, University of Michigan, University of California, Berkeley, and University of California, San Diego. And then we're working with public schools. We're in talks with Chicago Public Schools, like I mentioned earlier, but we already have an agreement in place with Maine Public Schools. We're launching hot halal lunches across 30 schools in Westbrook, Portland, and South Portland. And recently, Auburn and Lewiston has demonstrated that they're interested in coming on. And I just want to highlight here, I was just on a call with the Maine public school team yesterday. And the challenge for us is a lot of this program, like when I'm talking about the food bank program or the Maine public school program, those are unfunded. This is work that we're doing to make sure these kids are not food insecure, but we do need to find out how we make these programs sustainable so that that people have food on a regular basis without risking not having a program in place next year or the year after. So really would love to talk to this network on how everybody could support and build out the food bank program as well as the public school program as we look to expand. So airline kitchens, I just put this in here. Airline and college campuses, those are funded by the university. They have meal programs, so we don't need funding for that. They're paying for it, and they have a supply chain that's built in that we work with. So it's more to demonstrate that we're doing this and we know how to do it, and we're doing it on a regular basis, and we're able to deliver thousands of meals on a regular basis, on a daily basis. The next one I think is correctional facilities. So we have an agreement with the Minnesota Correctional Facilities, and we work on developing meals for the inmates' dietary needs. Again, this is underfunded. We really do this to support food security for the inmates, but not an area that's funded. And then I think we have one more. We do ready to eat meals, MREs for the military service as well. We certify those, and of course that's not an area that needs to be funded. It's something that the military, the U.S. military, and the suppliers work with us to develop. So I think that's it. I think that's the end of my presentation. I kind of modified the presentation a little bit, trying to be relevant to this audience, but I'm not sure if I skipped anything or if anybody has any questions. I'd love to answer.
Yeah, let's open it up for questions. Thank you, Asma. That was very comprehensive, even though I know you had a short amount of time.
I was trying to go fast and I was just stumbling on my words.
No, we appreciate it, and just all the work that Ivanka does, and we appreciate the partnership with the Alliance to End Hunger. But why don't we open it up for questions or comments? Also, if you have an initiative where you're working to improve access to halal foods, we'd love to hear about it as well. So let's just open it up. Please unmute yourself if you'd like to speak.
I will start by just saying thank you so much, Asma, for sharing. I have like a whole page of notes and have like 5 different ideas and people I want to send this recording to. One thing that came up that I've been really thinking about, especially as you were talking about how do we make this sustainable, is so I do a lot of anti-hunger advocacy work in Iowa, but I also do some food systems advocacy work and work with farmers and other folks to. I think in Iowa we haven't had a lot of wins lately, but where we have had wins are around local food purchasing incentives and things to um, help develop local markets. And during the pandemic, we had this like butchery innovation bill because of all the supply chains with the large meat packing houses. So they really wanted to invest in small scale butchers. We had the creation of this Choose Iowa food pilot program, which basically provides some matching funds for food banks and schools to purchase food, and meat is one of the categories, as long as it's from a Choose Iowa vendor, meaning someone who is, that food is being raised and processed in the state and they're going through the certification process. So I'm just trying to like connect some dots here and thinking this is a very Iowa specific thing, but wonder if this might be something other states with local food purchasing programs could look at. But I don't know that we have any small scale halal butchers in Iowa, at least none that I'm aware of. And if the state is investing in small scale butchers and is also investing in promoting markets for high need items for food banks and schools, like there's got to be a way to connect those dots to help
And there's a real
start
need.
up a small scale halal butcher that could then be selling with those state subsidized funds to food banks and schools. So anyway, I want to talk after this. I'll probably be reaching out with an email.
Yeah.
But I see some connections around like those local food systems work, and I know there's other states that are looking at these local purchase incentives, and knowing that like halal foods are such a high need at food banks and schools, I feel like there's some connections there. So
Definitely. And I think I was just talking to somebody from the Illinois, I'm gonna blank on somebody from Illinois who kind of works with small farmers. And they said we have so many poultry farms that have gone under because they couldn't connect with consumers. And I'll tell you, San Diego, like I'm telling you from clients that are paying, University of Chicago, Northwestern, San Diego, Berkeley, and Wayne State all want halal poultry. And we're not able to source it because we cannot find poultry suppliers. So there is a real opportunity to connect, and maybe through some of these economic incentives, connect to bring those conversations, bring these people together. And this is not even, I'm talking about universities that have contracts in place, right? But this is not even talking about Maine, who doesn't have a poultry supplier for their public school systems. Chicago Public Schools, who are looking to come on, in the next year or so, they don't have poultry suppliers. And these are all spaces that there's a void in the supply chain, in the infrastructure of this country. And part of it is us having these conversations, giving this conversation a platform and articulating that need. So as we look at, farmers that want to move in and grow, this is a space for them to build.
Thank you so much. Lots of opportunities there, I think, for connections. Any other comments or questions for Ozma? All right. Thank you. Thank you so
I'm
much.
sorry, I
sorry,
did have a question. Oh,
Yeah.
go ahead, Mark.
Just a quick question. Sorry, I often turn my video off when you're doing slide presentations because I've got my face right in the screen and nobody wants to see that. But I wanted to see if you could share the PowerPoint. I'd love to share it with my coworkers and a few of our other coalition members.
Yes. Alia, you have it. You're welcome to share
Yes,
it.
I'm gonna send the PowerPoint out as a follow-up, and it will also live on our website.
Yeah,
Thank
and
you.
we also send out the recording, and you can send anyone to our website as well. Thanks, Mark. All
Thank you.
right. So thank you, Ozma. Moving on to our next topic, we're going to talk a little bit about year-end policy updates, what the Alliance is up to. So I know for those of you who were with us earlier, Karen introduced herself. Karen is our newest staff member at the Alliance to End Hunger. She's our U.S. policy manager, and she is helping us to get our message out on Capitol Hill in terms of our priorities. And with the incoming new administration in Congress, we'll be out front advocating, and we're going to need all of you to help us do that. But I've asked Karen to come and give an update on what we're working on currently during lame duck and some of the things we see coming up in the new administration as well.
Yes, hello, and thank you for asking me to share. You may have heard in the news, if you are paying any attention, that um, there is a gap at times between what some people want and what other people want. And so that has resulted in things not getting done. So now we're in this in-between time. Some things are ending and new things are beginning. So there's a lot of jockeying around and staking out ground of the people who will be coming into the new Congress. The 119th Congress will start in 2025, and the new administration. But before the end of the year, Congress needs to do some work. They, and please pardon me, I'm getting over a cold here. Congress needs to fund the government. They gave themselves a deadline of December 20th. And so they have 10 days unless they come to some agreement of extending that agreement, or less likely coming up with a brand new agreement. They need to do something so there isn't a government shutdown. And there's that wide gulf in agreement and philosophy between what Democrats in Congress and Republicans in Congress wish to make happen and how much they wish to spend. So what they do need to do, and the leaders on the appropriation committees are meeting. We hear Congress is expected to pass yet another short-term agreement. Sometimes this is called a stopgap or a patch through a continuing resolution of the budget. So already the fiscal year 2025 spending agreement ran out September 30th. They extended it once through December 20th, and they need to do something else again now. Going along with that are desires by people who've been impacted by disasters to get some federal funding out to the people who've been impacted by hurricanes, wildfires, droughts, including the farmers that grow the food. So a disaster aid package may be combined or linked in the same legislative package as the continuing resolution, or it might be different. No one seems to know or say for certain yet. But last month, the Biden administration sent a letter to Congress detailing their requests for a disaster package, which are totaling nearly 100 billion. It included assistance for FEMA, Federal Emergency Assistance Program. And in our world, it did include $30 million in funding for WIC state agencies that were impacted by the hurricanes. A great thing that continued on out of COVID was these new ways that WIC participants can apply for or be certified in the program by distance, phone or video calls. And that's been really helpful to people who've been impacted and have to move out of their homes because they were impacted by the hurricanes. So the WIC advocates are hoping to keep those in place and to have that additional funding for state agencies who were impacted by the hurricanes. And then the Alliance sent a letter to appropriators in Congress that packaged together these nutrition funding requests to fully fund and invest in federal nutrition programs in whatever packages or vehicles come out at the end of the year here. So and Minerva has shared that in the chat if you would like to look at that. So we lift up our member organizations' priorities and kind of put them all in one place so that the people in Congress can see and hopefully include those in their disaster assistance or end of year spending packages. A third thing that's related to all this end of the year activity is the Farm Bill. So most all of you, we all started out thinking like, oh yeah, Farm Bill 2023. Well, Farm Bill 2024, probably not going to happen. Farm Bill 2025. Some people are saying that they think that a Farm Bill may not even happen in 2025 because there's so much for a new administration to accomplish. However, again, Congress has put itself into a need to extend that current large package of agriculture and nutrition funding. Excuse me. And they need to extend that once again. They've already extended it once and the deadline's kind of run out, but unless they extend the Farm Bill by the end of the year, then parts of it revert back to these very old and arcane, decades old versions of the Farm Bill. So we are, advocates are hoping that they will extend the Farm Bill. Things that are differences in philosophy and amounts of spending have to do with how much to put in farming programs. And we're just really listening closely. We're meeting with the agriculture committees in the House and in the Senate to hear if they're looking at any nutrition programs as a source of funding. And we're not hearing that they are, but we are just really keeping our ears open. So those three things are on Congress's to-do list by the end of this year. And it's even though we may be getting a little tired of Farm Bill, it's really important because the people in Congress, they respond best to their constituents, to the people who have the opportunity to vote for them. So your continued telling members of Congress about the importance of your programs, what you do, and when possible to have people speak for themselves if it doesn't put them in a harmful situation and if they're comfortable in doing that, using their own voices. And then looking ahead to the 119th new Congress, there's new folks coming in. So that's another opportunity to educate and inform members of Congress and their staff members on why your programs are important. I'll stop there and be happy to answer any questions if you have them, or Minerva, if you thought of something else that should be shared at this time.
No, that was great, but let's go ahead and open it up for questions. If you have any questions for Karen, please go ahead and unmute yourself. But rest assured, as there are opportunities to weigh in, to have your voice heard on Capitol Hill, whether it's a sign-on letter, an invitation to a virtual meeting with one of your congressional representatives, we will be reaching out to you. And similarly, if you are having issues, at the state level where you'd like the Alliance to weigh in or just have questions. Like, for example, Luke, I know when Iowa was trying to pass a bill on restricting SNAP purchases, you and I had a lot of conversations about, what the actual possibilities were that USDA would approve such restrictions, right? So we're also here to be a resource for you if you have questions. If you need connections like at USDA to answer questions or just to help us understand what's happening in your state around some of these issues, please think of us in that regard as well.
I have one question. I know there's a lot happening, and we probably don't know where things stand yet till we see kind of the bill, but I know that replacement benefits for victims of SNAP skimming theft has been a big issue. Do you know, has there been any movement on that or updates, or are we kind of just advocating and waiting to see the bill?
Thank you. I was going to talk about that and I didn't. It's one of our Alliance priorities. And so people who use SNAP EBT cards there've been increasing reports and cases of their benefits being stolen right off their cards. And so in an appropriations bill, the one that expires on December 20th, the last appropriations bill included funding for federal dollars to replace those stolen SNAP benefits that were stolen through skimming. So we're at a time again where advocates are hoping to attach more funding for federal funding for that through the Farm Bill extension. What we're hearing is outreach to moderate Republicans, especially on what might have happened to some people who had their benefits stolen. And I also heard a report today that some members of Congress are getting SNAP fraudulent activities mixed up with SNAP skimming. SNAP skimming is like thieves stealing them, and it's not through any fraud or people not sharing truthful, honest information on an application or something. So to reach out to moderate Republicans and let them know that this really is happening to people and what happens to people who have their benefits stolen. And it's a priority of the House Democratic Agriculture Committee and Democrats to make sure that's included. But there are some that still need to be convinced.
Yeah, so we're working on this, we'll be reaching out as appropriate. But this is a big concern, not just for us, but the entire anti-hunger community, to make sure that, families who depend on these benefits are able to get replacement benefits as needed. Thank you, Karen. Any other questions for Karen or comments? Awesome. Thanks. So with the few minutes we have left, I'll just turn over to Aaliyah to give us a few updates on what we have happening soon related to the Hunger Free Communities Initiative. But before we do that, I do want to take a moment, just thank all of you who participated in the Hunger Free Communities Summit. I can't believe that was already last month. And I know some of you spoke at that, and thank you for that. And some of you participated, but the entire thing is on our website. So if you missed any of the sessions, if you had registered, you probably can still see them in Excel events, but they're now on our YouTube channel at the Alliance. Analia, thank you for dropping in that link to the playlist for the 2024 Hunger Free Community Summit. So please check out the offerings. Thank you. Analia, I'll turn it over to you.
Sure, thank you. To wrap us up, I have two updates for us. The first one being we are very excited to announce our next regional Southern convening, which is going to be next year on January 29th. So if you are in the Southern region, you will be seeing a lot of emails from me if you haven't already. These in-person convenings really supplement our virtual summit. And these are designed to foster collaboration between Southern groups, share best practices, discuss emerging themes in our collective work. We're really excited that Shipt is going to host us this year for this convening in Birmingham, Alabama. So we're really, really excited for that. And we are collaborating with Auburn to put this convening together. So we hope to see our Southern groups if you're here. There, and more information, including our agenda. Our final agenda will be shared in the coming weeks. I'll put our RSVP link in the chat in case that applies to you. And that's our first one. And then our second update is that we are beginning fundraising for this next cycle of the Zero Hunger Grant. So please keep an eye out in your inboxes for more information about that. We hope to have an application open also in January. Yeah, Minerva, anything else? I think that's pretty much our big two right now.
That's all we had. So any questions for us before we leave? All right. Well, thank you all and happy holidays. So we'll put out the schedule for the 2025. I can't believe I'm saying that 2025 meetings. So we'll see you in the first quarter of 2025 and appreciate all of you. And we'll be following up with the information shared at this meeting, particularly the PowerPoint and the recording. Thank you all and happy holidays.
Happy holidays, everybody. Thanks for
Be
joining us.
well.
Thank you, Ozma. Thanks, Karen.